January this year, I did do this thing talking about anosmia awareness. I will just play through it again, adding more extra insight to it, and this will be part 2, as there's honestly not much excess data I can make a considerable separate entity to this. I can just go over more of the interpersonal relations as I cover things. So, skip this because I did this as a something else. I'm related to anosmia. At all. Anosmia is classified here just for technicality reasons, just to show everything. All human beings communicate as animals through sight, sound, touch, and taste and smell. Do not have any of these senses is to be considered disabled. Each of these disabilities is why it's interesting in this is that to the extent that it's disability, in some ways it depends on your support systems. How much of a disability it feels like in the grand scheme of things depends totally on your support networks. If you're someone who has no support networks, it will feel like much more of a disability than if you do have support networks. Even people who have no sense of smell, even as a baby, if they have proper support networks, can have it not feel like a disability in any regard whatsoever. Even you just learn to get accustomed to other people doing certain things for you, and other people looking out for certain things for you. That it's mitigated. And I'm not joking about that. It's like food quality. Making sure that do food poisoning, ensuring that your clothes are clean, ensuring that you are clean, so on, is depending on other people. Considered a communication disorder. So there you go. It's probably more technically that a communication disorder. Where it says, as for definition, anosmia can be partial or complete. Although a complete loss of smell is fairly rare, loss of smell can also be temporary or permanent depending on cause. When the loss of smell is partial, the condition is called hyposmia. Some people are anosmic for one partial odor called specific anosmia, although the loss of smell can sometimes be a symptom of a serious condition. It isn't necessarily serious. Still, an intact sense of smell is necessary to taste foods fully. Loss of smell could heavily reduce interest in eating, leading to weight loss, malnutrition, or even depression. Anosmia often seems to those who have systems in working order to be the easiest communication disorder to live with. Yet ask anyone who had a sense of smell taken away from them, and you'll find this sense is seriously underrated and taken for granted. Another aspect to this is this actually came from commentary when talking to family who have it. No, they don't have anosmia, but they have diabetes and dyslexia. And what happened in that case was they really understand the mindset much more than people who have no issues whatsoever, because they understood automatically that having anosmia, much like their diabetic / dyslexia, means that in some ways the world we live in is not different. For example, right, they can't read properly, and takes much longer for them to read things. The diabetes is whatever, that's a separate subcategory, but the dyslexia itself is something in which would make a distortion on how you perceive reality and everything around you, because it can ultimately infringe on and affect how you interact with others. The reason why anosmia is a reality altering condition in some forms is due to the fact that due to the nature of anosmia, what you have to deal with is not even if you normalize yourself to having it, is just the disappointment. For example, as of recently, I've been having issues with food again because I've noticed something I've been doing, which worked before, is now starting to fail. And for example, right, I am now having to experiment into how to get more out of things. One thing I have done for the past few months, for example, is basically doubling or tripling amount of things in like when I do hot drinks. So let's say a cup of tea, not just one tea bag, but two tea bags. When when I want a cup of coffee, not just one teaspoon, not just one spoon of it. It takes like 3 or 4 to basically have any impact. Honey, honey in hot water. Then even with that, it still takes much more honey per water level to actually make it meaningful. When I say meaningful, baseline taste level. And that is something that I'm really slightly concerned about now because that is now starting to slip a little bit, and that is slightly concerning. The core thing here is invisible disabilities. It's defined as invisible disability or hidden disability is an umbrella term that captures the whole spectrum of hidden disabilities or challenges, primarily neurological. Invisible disabilities or hidden disabilities are defined as disabilities that are not immediately present. Some people with visual or auditory disabilities who don't wear glasses or hearing aids or discrete hearing aids may not be obviously disabled. Some who have vision loss may wear contacts. A sitting disability is the category of invisible impairment. Chronic back pain usually causes sitting problems. Those with joint issues or chronic pain may not use mobility aids. Sorry to break the flow for a second again, but one thing also that is a direct impact of anosmia is you get much less adventurous on food because there's no guarantee what you will eat will be worth eating in the first place. And because by that, there's actually no way to really necessarily measure aside from recording in logs for long durations the changes between the situation. There's nothing in the brain which tells you how worse or how much better things is. The only way you can tell if your anosmia itself is getting better is if your smelling capability is getting better, which it is not. That then means that the taste sense itself is basically held redundant and under blackmail basically by it, with there being no way to determine the degradation or acceleration of things surrounding it. May, in some days, although the disability creates a challenge for that person who has it, the reality of the disability can be difficult for others to recognize and acknowledge. Others may not understand the cause of the difficulty if they cannot see the evidence of it. To explain on this, in 2015, this was also said. Disability can come in many different forms. People who are familiar with a visible disability, a neighbour down the street who uses a wheelchair, or a friend who has a good guide dog. But what about someone with disability that's not visible? Loosely defined, is a disability that is not immediately noticeable. They can include brain injuries, chronic pain, mental illness, gastrointestinal disorders, much more, because they're not obvious to spot. Invisible disabilities may be overlooked and misunderstood. And unfortunately, this can lead to discrimination or exclusion of those with a invisible disability. One thing, though, is to say is that I do not want this to be anything for pity, but rather just a understanding or educational thing to explain the mindset and the evidence linking to it. Of course, there's some other aspects towards this, which is some things saying the anosmia situations could be caused by pollution as well as other stuff. But that's neither here nor there.
One thing to understand, though, critical about this is that anosmia isn't unnatural. It's actually perfectly natural. But just because you don't see it often in young people doesn't mean it's unnatural. Anosmia itself is a natural process. It will happen to most of us anyway. Like it or not, you will get anosmia eventually at some point in your life, whether young, from birth, or otherwise. Does it necessarily matter? No. You'll probably get it some way or another. As is said here, and as you can read, after 60 is when it starts kicking in much more. There's also some measures in which, say, 40 as well is a trigger point that you can get it. Because 40 to 50 is the age where a lot of genetic diseases can kick in, and that's probably where anosmia could start kicking in as well. But the point is to say, 60 to 85 is where it starts getting really more common to have anosmia. And then at 60 to 85, if your sense of smell is perfectly intact, you are an anomaly at that point. So realistically,
of course, if there's any differences and discretions, that also applies as well. That is obvious, but this is a general trend of things. The older you get, the increased chance that anosmia will get into you, because the sensory breakdown is linked to the body's general health, and the body's cells destroy each year, so on, so on, so on. So it's only natural that some things will inherently get worse over time.
Your own young friend groups, you may not know anyone who has anosmia, but most likely your grandparents have a form of anosmia. The fine point in this source, I think, that needs to be mentioned here is that also taste and smell can have a significant impact on quality of life. If one needs to decrease appetite and poor nutrition, it can sometimes contribute to depression. Also, taste can also might tempt you to use excess salt or sugar on your food to enhance the taste. This could be a problem if you.
Salt is actually something I tend to use as well nowadays as well. Pepper, it's either it's like really strong peppers, and there's also something really cool we got at a French market, which is truffle salt. It's very, very strong salt, like really intense, but it's really nice.
Have high blood pressure or diabetes. To this, I'd say, and that's with my personal experiences. Now all definitions are said. As for depression, yes, it did lead to increased depression. As for appetite, yes and no. My appetite hasn't changed that significantly. But what has changed is the enjoyment of food in the first place. Certain foods I don't get any enjoyment out of. I eat often now because I have to eat because of nourishment for the body. Otherwise, there's no point in me eating.
That has not changed. In fact, that's gone worse. Between the time making this and now, my general enjoyment of food has gotten worse.
For the common excess salt or sugar, I guess, like in cakes and stuff like that, and biscuits, and could be classified under that. Which I do actually now adore biscuits because it's probably one of the few things which has enough value in flavor for me. The biggest issue, though, I think, as was said here, is actually quite interesting. This was doing a light comment about in my personal conduct. Well, yes, some they lose weight, but for others they gain weight as well. For example, the World Economic Forum, at least for this, talking about COVID-19, that is, for others, things smell fluid. And anosmia could be taken to parosmia, food that could be fine one day, could be discussing next. This chaos narrative, as sociologists call it, meant that smell loss was very difficult to live with, let alone manage, a condition over which there was no control. The effect on appetite was also unpredictable, as might be expected. People have trouble eating, particularly when normal smells were distorted. And if they're gone completely, it's even harder eating some things. Some were really struggling, reporting malnutrition and severe weight loss. That I can definitely see happening as well. Less obvious, some people reported weight gain. Those with anosmia who were chasing flavour after losing sense of smell. You can understand this if you realise the distinction between wanting and liking in what psychologists call the pleasure cycle. Wanting is where you're chasing the thing you might like to consume. That, for example, can be anything you want in food. I'm not going to judge. Liking is when you got it and you're savouring it. In anosmia, that savouring part is no longer there, but it doesn't stop the wanting. And I'm actually in the part there where I do seek some form of flavour. I look for it. It often never happens, but I go way too extreme in manners to get any flavour. In which some could say is butchering balance completely just to get anything out of it. That isn't just nothing. So this was an interesting comment. Above that, it said this. By speaking to people in this group, it was talking about a group we made, about people who suffered anosmia through COVID-19, we were able to build a picture of the wider impacts of disrupted smell following COVID-19 at a time of conducting research. We started posting questions quite a better sense of what's going on, and the response was overwhelming. People wanted their experiences to be heard, burning themes, yada yada yada. We wanted to be sure they were taking songs who we found. And this is where the comment is where the commonality between COVID-19 anosmia and regular anosmia is here. Ending with food satisfaction as a whole. So this is where later I'll be talking about COVID-19 anosmia versus acquired anosmia or other forms of anosmia. For example, this segment from 2017 is normal. 72, starting to lose sense of smell and getting anosmic features. That's fairly normal and within what is recorded the most common range between the 60 and 85 range. For example, as I said here, this is just a good proving here is that anosmia can hit you early or late. It's all because the brain and body degrades, changes, warps. So basically, some form of anosmic response is to be expected. As for anosmia itself, there isn't this one kind. By technicality, there's multiple kinds. There's only two by technicality: congenital and acquired. I honestly can't remember which one I am specifically. Don't ask me which one I am. My memory of early life is terrible. I can't remember any of it. Here we go. I'll highlight this section here just so those watching can see. Congenital anosmia is a condition in which people are born with lifelong inability to smell. It may occur as an isolated abnormality, no symptoms, and associated with specific genetic disorders such as you can read yourself. Isolated congenital anosmia might occur in people who do not have a family history of the disease, although some familial cases have been reported. In most cases of isolated congenital anosmia, the genetic code is unknown. So this is the most basic form of anosmia, which is you're basically born with it. To be my point I said earlier, this is a good example. Symptoms of anosmia can occur at any time. That is a really interesting thing about it. Much like any other invisible disability, it can occur before birth, newborn, infant, child, adolescent, adult, or older. And as the source said, symptoms may start to appear as newborns and infants. So some people could just never have the ability completely. And that's where I think the whole issue for some may kick in. Because some people smell perfectly fine. Some people have no invisible disabilities and everything works perfectly fine. Some people might have everything else working fine, except for one thing, which is what some might have here.
The thing that makes it so scary as a whole thing is that once it gets you, there's nothing you can do about it. Because if you get an infected throat or a infected foot, you can deal with it. you can take medication, you can apply things to it to get it functioning. But the core point is, with anosmia, is there is no cure. If you have it and your brain doesn't sort it out and your body doesn't sort it out itself, you're stuck with it for life, basically, and there's nothing you can do about it.
Yeah. Because as it said here, the most common ages for symptoms of a disease to begin is called an age of onset. Age of onset can vary for different diseases and may be used by doctors to determine the diagnosis. For some diseases, symptoms may begin to appear at a single age range or several age ranges. For other diseases, symptoms may appear at any time during a person's life, with focus on at any time.
And this is why it's also kind of difficult when you actually do see a specialist, if you do suspect you have it, to actually determine when you actually did get it. It can be very vague as a direct result, because if you already had it for a long time and didn't notice, you won't know when it started. It's often only with those around you who would notice. So it's like, that, again, coming down to supporting family sort of situation. Sorry, supporting family or friends situation. Because if you don't actually notify yourself when it was kicking in, and as shown here, it can kick in since before birth to into elderly status. It and sometimes it might not even kick in at all necessarily until extremely old. I was super unfortunate to have it kick in very young, so I got to live with it. But that is besides the point.
And that's especially more so with anosmia, because anosmia can be triggered by many things. As you know, COVID-19 can cause it. Diseases, inflammation, but so can injuries, surgeries. Not even having any overt diseases or injuries, you can still get it. It's just one of those things which can happen to you regardless, and it causes such a major implication. The reason why NSSF is important is that treatment, therefore, of anosmia is very varying on how you got it. If you don't know how you got it specifically, treatment, therefore, can be very difficult. And there's basically no point having false hope over a treatment. Much like genetic diseases, anosmia is just one of them. Also, at the same time, people can get genetic diabetes as well. Yes, that's an actual thing, by the way. People can be living a perfectly healthy life, then boom, get 50, get diabetes, regardless of life choices, and then they have to suck it up. Genetic diseases are just cruel like that. This happen.
That's a small extract of what is in the video. I'll link the video, of course, obviously, but the core point is to say that anosmia itself is a very complicated issue in which there's a lot of downsides to it, which people tend to not understand or forget about. But that leads then into the question of how then do you deal with it in terms of a cure sense? And to that extent, it's more focused on the lack of funding being done. Because in COVID-19, there was more awareness towards anosmia, which is why there's so much academic works talking about anosmia and COVID-19. But beyond that, before then, it was more of a minority position in which there was not a focus on anosmic responses. And that itself is a key issue. This is as it stands right now. How is anosmia treated? This is by no means necessarily. There's the thing about anosmia, therefore, as a result, because of its nature, is because there is no universal cure. Surgery, basically how it works is, let's say, for example, you had a injury and your face got busted in or something, and you got anosmia to that. Then surgery is an option. If it's a case of where you think there's an issue with getting the nose to function correctly about the matter, with there not being any injuries necessarily, steroid medication if there's a infection, antibiotics. But beyond that, and if it doesn't work beyond that, currently you're kind of left in a redundant state in which you can't do much out of it. And that is the key issue. And as I'll go into in 2 seconds, this issue gets a lot worse and a lot less abstract in how to put. For example, as I find here by Hannah from 2023, the study of smell loss and still struggle for support. And this is kind of the issue. It's not necessarily that you can't, because I'm sure with modern science you could. It's that funding support becomes something in which is a kind of a problem. For example, it says here, for Meeks, the response was frustrating. One expert reviewer in particular didn't really understand why there would be any need to establish a preclinical model of anosmia with TBI. He said, noting the reviewer also wrote that because anosmia is not a major health problem, that the value of the research was low. And that is the issue. If people see responses to anosmia as low value, or basically redundant, basically in effect, for example, the actual stuff around COVID was more dedicated because there was more need for dedication to do it. As a direct result, then it was a case in which there was a focus towards getting COVID fixed. And anyway, continuing this one, and this is where it continues to say. This one is from, let me correct, 2021. Sorry, medically review 2018, but still fine. People with congenital anosmia have a lifelong inability to smell or have no concept of what smell even is. Currently, there's no cure or treatment for congenital anosmia. The reason why there might be some issues for some to support cures for anosmia for them, specifically, is often the case that because the actual rates of those who are born anosmic is so low in terms of per population count, it would cost millions to actually get a dedicated research done towards anosmia, much like any other disease or illness. And that is where the whole lack of funding and the aforementioned before not made a public risk in health qualification is kind of annoyance. And the reason this also is related is because this one here. Again, 2021, in the base of COVID-19, the Dutch organization SON has awarded funding for a large-scale study into loss of smell and taste as a result of COVID-19. During this research, development of loss of smell and taste, anosmia, and olfactory distortion, pareidolia, are examined. Little is known worldwide about this last symptom. That is also correct. Pareidolia is even more mystical than anosmia in some regards. The researchers are also testing whether is it an effective drug for And so there was research formed out of COVID-19 within this. And then you get comments like this from other things saying, when fully funded, anosmia research will have the potential to impact millions of individuals worldwide who are desperately seeking answers and for an underappreciated condition, and so on. Where it says, for example, some things they're working on. But the core issue then, as a direct result, is to say that for the care to be there for anosmic relief, there needs to be more public support for anosmic people. And there needs to be then a push for more funding towards getting cures in the first place. So there's a core issue surrounding anosmia. One key question which people, I guess, can raise up as well regarding anosmia, which is unrelated as I know, but relevant, is taste. How does taste work then with anosmia? It's quite simple. If a taste relies on smell to enhance its flavor, it's gonna taste shit. If it's a base taste in which can function with or without smell, you can detect it. Basically, leave it at that.